Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to do comedy together in San Francisco back when we were 19.
But we lost touch.
Years later, we found each other and discovered
that I'd become a painter, a performer, a writer, a Pilates teacher, an animal lover, and a biologist.
Wait, I'm a painter, performer, writer, Pilates teacher, animal lover, and well, okay, I'm not a biologist, but we're
lost friends.
And we're both speculative fiction writers.
And my work has appeared in MetaStellar magazine.
MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online magazine that they publish science fiction, fantasy, and horror. There's a link below in the YouTube channel, and you can check it out, and please subscribe for books, stories, tips on writing, and more.
Today, we are talking to performance scientist and research artist 3T Vakil. We're so excited. We're going to be talking about reclaiming mahogany, reforesting Puerto Rico, frog research, sailing around the world, doing coral research, theater, painting.
They're probably not all at once.
I know. I'm just so excited.
Oh, but first, before we get started, 3T, show us your pets or pet.
Hey, Grandma Laura. Come here. Well, I'll have to do that later.
Okay.
Oh, she's not there.
She jumped off the cushion where I had her ready, and now she disappeared.
She got bored.
Back.
Oh, I met Laura.
She'll be back.
Negra Laura. She likes to chase pine cones.
Yes, she does. She does.
So 3T, there's so much to talk to you about. I'd like to talk to you first about like art, science, how you got into coral testing, and then how it took you to forestry.
Were we going to remind our viewers, though, just before we get started, not to get confused. You're not on the wrong show, but you can't write science fiction without science. And climate change writing is really big right now. So in addition to speaking to writers, Long Lost Friends wants to speak to scientists, creative thinkers, and artists all over the world. Spark your imaginations.
So 3T, tell us all about art, science, and the journey.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's great to see you, Evie. You've been here out to my project in the Puerto Rico rainforest several times now. I am currently directing a sustainable forestry project, but before that, about 25 years ago now, I spent 3 years on a Chinese junk, started and built by the same people who started the project I'm at right now in Puerto Rico. They built a Chinese junk in the early 70s in Oakland, California, and that ship has been traveling around the world since then. And I managed to live on it for 3 years in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, studying coral reefs. Now, I'd never spent any time on the ocean before, didn't know anything about coral reefs, but the question is, how do you study coral reefs? Well, you go out and you study them. And that's what I did. And suddenly I was a diver and working on collecting scientific data on coral reefs. And of course, the marine life that lives in a coral reef. And it was just the most incredible life-altering experience I was so lucky to have in my just after my mid-20s is when I joined that ship, and it really did change my life.
So what, can you tell us anything about coral, the state of coral? Any hope?
Well, the studies that we were doing at the time were to map coral reefs. First of all, there is a dearth of actual maps of where coral reefs are. We were following 1920s and 40s army maps to locate coral reefs. So what we were doing was actually mapping the reefs that we found, and then also conducting health and vitality studies. And that was with the Professor Phil Dustin at the Florida University, who had come up with a score of how healthy a reef can be, something like 20 to 30 indicators of reef health. So we would go underwater to the various colonies, first of all, identifying our coral species, and then running on each of the colonies, running down the list of what condition that particular coral was in, whether it had fish bites, coral bleaching, algae, broken, very healthy, a whole list of indicators. So we collected an enormous amount of data on that. We also carried out fish surveys around the reefs, and also trash surveys in various places that we went to see what was the number one trash item, and how much, what were we seeing. And of course, plastics and things like that were the number one trash item. So we did find that coral, there was a lot of coral bleaching going on, and once coral bleaching happens, basically it's dying. And that is an indicator of oceans warming. One of the other studies that we carried out was to collect coral core samples for the Lamont Doughty Earth Observatory in New York, and that involved finding brain coral species and literally setting up a drill on top of those corals to take a very thin, maybe about 2 inches wide in diameter, coral sample from the entire reef to see in those particular core samples changes in temperature over time. And that's what a lot of the El Nino data was able to be brought out from looking at things like the changes in coral formation over time. So that was a really interesting study. And of course, I was doing this at the time before I even knew what coral reefs were. I was just busy learning the whole thing of what we were doing. And it's only in over the years, as I've become more aware of the climate change issues and global coral reef issues, have I, really understood what I was doing there at that time in terms of the data and how important it was in regard to the later stages of what happened with the data that we used, including the mapping. So coral reefs are under threat, just like rainforests. And, we used the term that the coral reefs are the rainforests of the seas, just like the rainforests are the lungs of the planet. They are a very important part of the ecosystem of the oceans. And we lose coral reefs at our peril. And that's quite apparent. And, with global warming happening and the ocean temperatures rising by even a few degrees, we're looking at catastrophic damage to coral reefs that is not reversible. And it's really important, the work people are doing now to build reefs using all kinds of materials. All of that kind of thing is incredible. Movements forward to keep our coral reefs healthy and vital as we move forward in this new era of, ecological change that's happening faster than we like to believe. Yeah.
So I have a question also, and this is just super quick for those who don't know. The coral is both it's an animal, but inside the animal is a little zeothalin, a little like an algae that actually photosynthesizes and creates the coral's color. When the coral gets stressed, it either spits out that little zeothalin or it leaves, whatever the reason, the little photosynthetic thing inside it is left, and that's why the coral gets white. Now the coral isn't dead yet, but usually they die. And I'm kind of curious, because these are two things I have no idea. Did you find, like, in your drilling into the coral, could you see, like, is there a place where you can see, oh, it bleached here and it got back its zeothalin and then it got...
No,
Nothing like that.
No, it's that. No, this would all be taken to a laboratory and examined in a laboratory. Basically what a coral core sample looks like is if you like the bone of an animal that's been, it's basically looks like bone actually, very porous, not very porous, but like hard bone. That's what it looks like coming out of a coral, from the depths of the coral as well. The other thing that we did also was to look for submerged reefs that were deeper than the regular reefs. They would be dead. They wouldn't be live reefs, but we were looking for reefs so that then and locate them so that then other vessels could come in to get even older reef data from those kinds of things. We were diving, so we weren't going like super deep. We were down to about 65 feet maximum in terms of the coral reef research, because reefs are about from water surface almost till about 50, 55, where the sunlight starts disappearing. But that we were also investigating any submerged reefs that we could find as well.
Great. I have a question that, can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of artificial reefs that are being, I've read a bit, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I don't know any organizations personally, but I also keep a little ear out. But in the Bali area, there are people making reefs with concrete. And also off the coast of Africa, I think it's Africa, they are making reef with tires. And everywhere in the world where there is reef, and it's really important, the reef, just even for erosion control, let alone the whole food chain that comes with a coral reef. People are all over the world where there are banks of reefs off the coast, which are protecting the land. People are making new coral onto concrete and old tires. These are some of the materials that reefs will grow on given a chance. And there are people who are creating coral reef, but growing coral reefs now. Everybody's like, the whole level of botanical knowledge seems to have like just blown up in the last 20 years or so, and people are actually growing reefs now to replant back into the reef structures. The reef, the actual corals themselves just need like a hard substrate to plant themselves into and on. And you could grow a coral reef. It's not an impossible task, even though it sounds like they're really ancient things that are under the water, but they're not. They're growing life. It's like having a garden, and they can be managed in the same way like your garden. Yeah.
Do you think going forward that if the seas are warming in areas right now where the reefs are and it's destroying them, is there hope to possibly move them to colder oceans? Like, could you move? As things really shift, I'm thinking science fiction here, people. As things really shift, maybe they could start to develop reefs in areas where it was before it was too.
I tell you what. Well, sorry, but this summer or winter, I'm actually going to spend 3 months in Bonaire, which is part of the ABCs, a little island off the coast of Venezuela. And they have the most advanced, comprehensive coral reef lab in the world. They've got more species than anyone. And they started growing a reef. They grow it in the lab. Then they have little bits of like coral that are like this big that they attach to trees, and they plant these trees. And last year they had ones that actually produced egg and sperm and new coral in this artificial reef. But one thing that they are finding, and I've read in other studies, well, two things. One is that there's some corals that are so much more heat resistant to other corals. So they're saying, well, maybe we could produce more of those, even though you want the diversity. So there was that. And then, one other little thing that I just found really interesting. If you play the sound of a healthy reef in a young coral thing. If you play them, the fish start coming because they hear all this noise, and then they'll stick around a bit. And so that's another way to get that all going.
Ah,
Yeah. That was an interesting question, Andrea, also because the Biosphere 2 project, they managed to take reef material in the seawater. They carried it in trucks all the way across to Arizona from Mexico, and from the Yucatan, in fact, and managed to create a fully healthy coral reef in Biosphere 2 in the very first days, which was in the late 88, 89, 90. And they actually created the world's first, I think, artificial reef and ocean with waves in the middle of the Arizona desert. So yeah, I think you can transplant. It's just, where are you going to transplant? You're either going to make an environment that is available with the right temperature, or yeah, you find places on the planet. I mean, it's a huge question, really. Where there are no reefs, maybe they won't survive because of the ocean currents or whatever. But it's an interesting question. Can we transplant reefs to other places where it is cooler? Because warming oceans will kill reefs, and that's already happening around the planet right now, and it's really serious. So these are really good questions and things that I hope people are looking into on the ocean frontier, as it were.
and once the reefs are gone, is it, it's catastrophic, but is it the end? I mean,
the reefs are the life, the places where fish feed. And where there are no coral reefs, it's kind of like a biological desert in a sense. The oceans are huge, waterways for fish to move around, but they move around to get to food. And the coral reefs are the major sources of food and the reproduction of other fish. So it's also land preservation. You lose your coral reef, you've got no barrier against erosion if your reef is gone. And that's why it's really important. And I think these are just things people are starting to learn in the last 50 years or so. I'm sure local people know these things, but also in the last maybe 100 years or so, local people have lost those knowledges. So people have been blowing up reefs to use the material for building. They've been dynamite fishing in the reefs to just, kill the fish and bring them to the surface. All these kinds of things that show no respect for the basis of the food in the ocean and the habitat for many animals underwater.
Yeah, like at least 25-50% of fish spend some portion of their life there, even if it's when they're babies.
Yeah.
As protection, and some always live there.
Yeah.
And to get a little bit, but I do feel that with like the projects in Bonaire and a lot of the research, that there's more worry, but there's also more hope, because there is so much research, and there are people like you, 3T, and others, and fingers crossed we won't.
And people all over the planet are working on things like this. There's a lot more university marine biology being done in the last 20 years than ever before. People are more aware, and there are definitely more programs where people can get involved with working on the sea with corals and all the marine life that goes with it. So no, it's heartening. It's not such a desperate situation. I think we just know that climate change is going to bring huge changes to all our lives, whatever it is. And we know that the ocean is also going to be impacted. There's no doubt about it. But we have to keep the hope that we're going to keep working at it.
Yeah, we do have to keep the hope. I also, tell me a little bit about life on the boat, because one thing that has struck me, as Sriti said, I visited her program a few times and intend to go back there. You're not going to keep me away. I just, it's such a magical place. They have incorporated art and science and creativity and living in small groups. And it's just, it's as close to a utopian community as I've seen. Of course, people are people, so you're always going to have a bit of trouble in paradise. But tell me a bit about that, because it blew my mind. Like the way even every meal is figuring out how to expand your mind and be more creative and all this. It's really quite amazing. So now you have to tell us how amazing it is.
So I'm not, sorry, Evie, I'm not quite sure what your question is.
Tell me, yeah, how do you guys come up with when you were traveling on the boat, I think there were like theater productions going on. I know there were in Biosphere. I know there was sometimes in the rainforest when I've been there, you have incorporated theater and art into science in a way that I think is very unique.
So you're asking her about when she was on the boat, though? Is that what you were asking her?
Well, on the boat into the forest, and the art science connection and how it led her to the forest. Is that clear? She's frozen.
She's frozen.
She's frozen.
So this would be, I was going to say, this would be a stopping point for the video, and she'll be back.
This would be a place where we're going to stop for the video. Yes, as soon as she comes back. So I don't know, how do I make that clear?
I think Elizabeth, I think what happened with that is because we were talking about the coral and the ship, and then you took it to the other direction, so it just makes it a little too big and too a little bit. So maybe we can hit that on the next one or so, and
Okay,
just stick with maybe what life was like on the boat, kind of.
Oh, you're on the other side now. That's okay. We decided I was being too complicated and we should just wait and do the art science piece next. So, you know, and this part will be cut out when you disappear and freeze on us. When I ask you questions and you sit there like.
So maybe Elizabeth, just like what it was like on the boat. That's where you started, and then you got excited.
So yeah, forgetting all this middle stuff that isn't going to exist. Nobody will ever know it existed. This is just our secret. We can, for 1 minute, you can say anything you want. Okay, then we go back to taping. Now, so 3T. So you were living on this boat for like 3 years. Tell us a little bit about what it's like. And then, if you can, how it led you into the forest, which we will talk about on the next episode. Can you hear me? Uh-oh, you're mute. There.
How's that?
Are you back?
Okay. Yeah. So the life on a ship is very interesting, and certainly in my my mid-20s when I joined the ship, I had never really worked with a group, and certainly not with a group where you couldn't just walk out the door if you had any kind of like bad mood or something. You had to. Everything has to be negotiated. Everything has to be figured out. And that was a huge learning, is that in a closed system, a group dynamic, things happen. People get irritated. People have bad moods. And John Allen, who was the man whose vision this boat was, and the Biosphere 2 project as well, he once said to me, "Any old fool can run a project." And I always thought that's weird. And now that I'm actually running a project, I realize that, yeah, any old fool can run a project. What's most difficult is to live with other people, work with other people for full-time, long-term projects. So this has been for me, and I think that I was immediately drawn to that. I'm drawn to working with groups. I'm working on projects, not necessarily like a career in this that climbs a ladder and blah blah blah, but actual projects, special projects here, special projects there, different parts of the world. And so that was the first time that I had been involved in that type of group dynamic, and I really was drawn to it. And so when I got back to land 3 years after living on the sea with this bunch of people who are still all my friends, and of course, you live through life and death experiences on the sea. There is no doubt about it. Your life is in everybody's hands. And I came to the rainforest through that experience, having gone to spend 4 years living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with the founders of this project and the builders of the ship and the builders of Biosphere 2, and learned to work with their land-based group dynamic, which involves, and this also happened on the ship, we did theater shows, we had dinners together, we did meditation together, we did everything that helps a group to make some kind of glue, as it were. And the theater part of all of that is really to help people to wear a different hat. You're not just the expedition chief, you're not just the captain, you're also someone else. You can play many roles, and theater is a great tool, I would say, for any group to use to stop people being caught in a box. And I think that's really important in a project, that you are able to play many roles. And here I am now at a forestry project. Who would have thought somebody from the city would end up in a forestry project? And now I've been the director of this project since 2007. And I think it's all of those experiences, learning how to work with people, wearing different hats, learning how to collect data, in fact, which is one of the major skills that came out of the reef research. I'd never done any kind of research work before, and suddenly I had those tools in my hands. So coming to work with Sally Silverstone, who was the previous director to me here in Puerto Rico at this forestry project, we took on a major survey of hardwood trees, and hence started my life here in this project. And I mean, I can now tell you a little bit of history of this project, if that's where you want me to go.
Well, should we hit that off?
Yes, what I think I'd like to do now is we'll end this section, and we always end it with the best thing we learned this week. And you can be personal if you want, but we also try and include something that's just a little more global. Best thing you learned this week. So what did you want to start? You look eager, Andrea. Do you have something?
No. Elizabeth, you almost always start. So I think
I know I always start. So I was like, okay, well, I do have to start a little bit of personal news. My detective story, first in a series. I've written 2. It's supposed to be 3, but I've only written 2 of them. But this just came out this week, Electric Detectives. So that's exciting for me. It's about a detective who gets struck by lightning, and the lightning supercharges biophotons in his head. And suddenly he sees the world in black and white, but then he has these color visions that are actually glimpses into other dimensions, because now he can understand electricity because of his being struck. And there's also a cat who gets struck, who's also very smart, named Matt, my cat. So that's one thing. Oh, and then the other thing, this is just kind of fun, is that those reflective things you see on the road at night were invented in England on this country road, like in the early 1900s. This guy was driving along, and suddenly he sees these things glowing, and he pulls over, and he's almost driven off a cliff, but there was a cat there. And he's like, I have to figure out a way to line cats up along the road at night. So they're just, so what he discovered is using glass and a reflective backing and a rubber coating, he could make those, those reflective things.
Wow.
So
I like how you managed to thread cat through your entire thing today.
Through my life. My life is threaded with cat. But I just like the idea of all those cats being forced to sit on an English country road with their eyes open.
Oh,
right. Elizabeth always has a million fantastic things. I don't know how she gathers them all. I was just struck this morning when I saw that Christo and Jean-Claude's L'Arc de Triomphe Wrapped opened today. I guess it was today, that they draped the entire L'Arc de Triomphe, and he started this idea back in 1962. And I guess he passed in 2020, I think it was, and it's still, he's just kind of, what an amazing imagination and brilliance. I remember back in the 70s seeing his, what they call the running fence in the Bay Area. And it was this long fence that went almost 25 miles through Marin and Sonoma. And I got to go up in a plane and see it from above when I was about the age Elizabeth and I met. And it was just amazing. And I just think it's so different and so wonderful. And so I was excited to see that.
Oh, very cool. And you?
Well, I got to see the Van Gogh immersive experience in Dallas just 2 nights ago. It was absolutely fantastic. I also just got published a beautiful interview that Naples Botanical Garden did with me earlier this year. Suddenly was a magazine article, and my photo made the front page of the magazine. One of my photos made the front page of the chapter of 3 Caribbean botanists working in the Caribbean, of course. And the article was just great. And it's really about the work that we're currently doing here at the project in Puerto Rico. So, you know, just being published is a great thing. I also managed to get 2 videos out, one of drone footage of this project, and one of the Earth Day botanical surveys that we did earlier this year with a bunch of amazing botanists here in Puerto Rico. I am so lucky to be working with some of the best botanists in the Caribbean. And it's a beautiful 3-minute journey into our forest, explaining what we do. And we literally just published that. And it's,
maybe we can get that linked below
soon. So
in the,
I'm very happy about
YouTube
that.
channel.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, 3T, I almost brought up the immersive Van Gogh because I just went a couple of weeks ago here in LA, and it was so fun. Yeah, and I was thinking, maybe I'll do immersive Van Gogh. So, yeah.
Oh.
And you know, the nicest thing was that it was all socially distanced, so it wasn't like big crowds of people either. I was really pleased about that. I imagined I'd be going into this kind of, I don't know, almost like a rave scene with lots of people huddled together. I mean, I was COVID, but it's actually very beautifully done. They did a super job of keeping everybody in there. You know, they had circles painted on the floor, and they didn't let in like big crowds. It was all pre-booked and everything, and it was really, really well done and handled.
Huh.
Yeah,
Maybe this
beautiful.
will be a lesson actually that we learned from COVID, is how to do better exhibits with more space and less.
Yeah,
that would be
definitely.
Nice. Yeah, silver linings.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we
Thank
will
you.
see you soon.
Yes, and we wanted to thank everybody for watching.
Right, and we want to thank Maria and Alex Korolov for editing and producing and directing. We couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much.
And if you, our viewers, enjoyed the show with 3T, please like it. And if you don't want to miss our upcoming episodes, subscribe to the channel. So thank you again. And until next time, we'll see you soon.